Hi everybody, this is godsgirlg, and thank you so much for joining me today. For those of you who are new to my channel, welcome. And for those of you returning to this channel to watch this video and you're not already subscribed, I'm going to encourage you to do so by clicking the subscribe icon below. And if during the course of this video you hear something that you like, click the thumbs up, comment below, or better yet, share this video with someone that you feel could benefit from this information. With that stated, let's get into today's discussion. Have you ever been let down by well-meaning people? A loved one perhaps, a parent, grandparent, sibling, or even a close friend? Well, if you haven't been let down by someone that's close to you, stay tuned. When you are let down by well-meaning people, the results can be life-crippling. The literal word crippled means being unable to walk due to an injury or an illness. When we talk about being crippled by life, we are referring to being unable to effectively walk this life's journey because of emotional, psychological, or spiritual injuries that we sustain. Now, when someone is physically crippled, it is visually obvious. Emotional, psychological, or even spiritual crippling, it's not always easy to spot. The story of Mephibosheth is a such story that talks about how life can cripple you. But before getting into Mephibosheth's story, I have to give you a little bit of background. Saul, the first king of Israel, chosen by the people, had a son named Jonathan. And David, whom Saul hated, but God had chosen as king, was best friends with Jonathan. David and Jonathan made a covenant. They would protect each other. And David even vowed that he would protect the descendants of Jonathan. Unfortunately, during the battle against the Philistines at Mount Gilboa, Saul was injured, later killing himself, and Jonathan perished at the hand of the Philistines, along with all of Jonathan's brothers. 2 Samuel chapter 9 is where Mephibosheth's story picks up. After taking the throne through God's will, David asked a question. Are there any relatives of Saul, the previous king, whom David could show kindness to? Now remember, David wanted to show kindness to Saul because of his bond with Saul's son, Jonathan. Now Jonathan had a son who was crippled and living in hiding because he was afraid that David would kill him. So let me provide a little bit of explanation about that. In those days, it was common for a new king to kill off the rest of the royal family, so there would be no challengers to the throne. So here is a prime example of David doing the opposite. Instead of seeking out, are there any descendants of King Saul, to kill them, he actually wanted to show kindness. Now, Mephibosheth had a very difficult childhood early on. His name means one who blows upon shame. Mephibosheth was helpless, he was poor, and exiled east of the Jordan River, outside of Canaan land. With the news of his father Jonathan and his grandfather Saul's death, young Mephibosheth was taken away from his home by his nurse, most likely to avoid retaliation from enemies. Unfortunately, in the process of escaping, the nurse accidentally threw Mephibosheth to the ground and his feet were permanently crippled. In that time period, people with severe injuries or disabilities weren't proudly shown or welcomed, especially if they were royalty. But David made it a point to meet with Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth was found in a place called Lodebar, and he was brought to David in Jerusalem. Lodebar to me is significant. The word Lodebar is translated no word or no thing. It represents a pastureless place, not very complimentary. Lodebar represents a place of isolation, desolation, and lack. It also represents Mephibosheth's position by others and his view of himself, having been reduced to nothing. When Mephibosheth came to David, he was actually expecting to be killed. So he fell on his face before David and paid homage to him. But David responded, "Do not fear, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan, and I will restore to you all of the land of Saul, and you shall always eat at my table." Although there is more to this story, there's just enough in that small passage to talk about and learn from. So now let's talk about the things that cripple us. Being hurt by someone, what they've said, what they've done, or what they've not done. You can be crippled by failure, loss of a job, income, or a position that meant a lot to us. You can be crippled by loneliness, the feeling of always being alone even though you're surrounded by people. Fear can cripple us. Mental health issues can cripple us. But there are some lessons in Mephibosheth's story that I want to talk about, lest we miss them. Lesson 1, Mephibosheth's story teaches us that we are to trust in God. He is our source. Mephibosheth's injury was because someone dropped him. It was not his fault. Sometimes in our life, there are situations that cause us to fall and damage our life. The hardest part about this is that someone that you trusted dropped and crippled your life. But we must remember, God asks us to put our trust in Him and not in others. He will work it out. 2, we might not be crippled in our feet, but we might be crippled spiritually. God does not want us to be crippled in any way. A trusted nurse dropped Mephibosheth. It was not his fault. We should be aware that people will drop us, and it can have a huge impact on our lives. But again, we must trust in the Lord. 3, we learn that God uses people to bless others who feel forgotten. As David was used by God to bless Mephibosheth when he was least expecting it, He can do the same for us. And 4, the Lord gives us an open invitation to His table to dine with Him. When David invited Mephibosheth to eat at his table, we see a picture of coming to the Lord's table. Although we don't always feel worthy, when we confess our faults, the Lord is always willing to forgive and forget. He wants to restore our connection with Him, no matter what happened in the past. So let us not be crippled by the fall and failures of others, and let us not look back on our own failures as if they have not been forgiven. Mephibosheth is a wonderful example of the redemption that is available to those who come humbly before the Lord. It doesn't matter that we don't have anything, that we've been shamed or rejected. We are all welcomed at His table. Like Mephibosheth, we may be dropped by well-meaning people. And one thing's for sure is that you can't predict when you're going to get dropped. But when you are dropped, don't let it send you to Lodebar, the land of nothing. Mephibosheth was royal, but he wasn't living as one. He was the grandson of a king, yet he considered himself to be worthless when he should have been enjoying all of the liberties of being royal. But when Mephibosheth met the grace that David extended, everything changed. All of his present needs were met and his future was secured. The same is true for all of us experiencing God's grace. When we were enslaved by sin, when we were in Lodebar, we were lost and had no hope. But when God extended and embraced us with His grace, everything changed. And more than that, we have become partakers and heirs of His kingdom. Thank you so much for joining me today. And don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Bye.